This story is titled, "My Uncle Tried to Prove I Was Incompetent to Steal My Inheritance, so I Outsmarted Him in Court when my grandmother passed and left me her entire estate, worth a staggering $2. 3 million. I knew Uncle Garrett would lose his mind. He'd been hanging around for years like a vulture, waiting for the day he'd cash in. But what he didn't expect was to be the last one standing at Grandma's grave, staring at her headstone while the rest of us moved on. It was brutal sitting in that lawyer's office as the will was read aloud. Garrett sat there, muttering under his breath, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, cycling so fast it was almost comical. When the lawyer got to the part where it said I would inherit everything on my 25th birthday, which was only 6 months away, I thought Garrett might fall out of his chair. Every asset, every investment, even Grandma's collection of antique jewelry, it was all coming to me. Garrett, on the other hand, got nothing but a dusty old tea set and a handwritten note that read, "For your years of false worry." Before he could explode, you could see the war raging on his face. 17 different emotions flashed across it like storm clouds. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," he growled, shaking his head at the lawyer. "Vivian? She can barely keep her life together. She dropped out of law school. She lives like a hermit. She's unstable." But the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, simply adjusted his glasses and said flatly, "The will is legally sound. When your mother drafted this, she was of perfectly sound mind." Across the room, Cheryl, Garrett's wife and my step-aunt, looked like she might throw up. She'd married Garrett for one reason: his inheritance. She'd already picked out new furniture for the lake house, planned renovations on the family estate, and even booked luxury European vacations she was going to take with her money. I knew this because I'd overheard her gushing about it to her interior designer on the phone a few weeks back. The redesign alone would have cost more than most people make in a year. As Cheryl's fingers dug into Garrett's arm, so hard her knuckles turned white, she hissed, "We need to fix this." "Yeah, sure," Garrett said, voice calm but eyes blazing with calculation. "You have to understand, Garrett's always been a schemer. Even as a kid, he was constantly finding ways to twist situations to his advantage. When we were younger, he would tell our relatives Grandma was playing favorites with me, hoping they'd pressure her to put him in her will. He'd buy gifts he couldn't afford, then whine about his financial struggles so Grandma would bail him out. But Grandma wasn't a fool. I still remember her standing in the kitchen one Christmas, rolling cookie dough, as she told me, "Your uncle's problem is simple. He thinks everyone else is as gullible as he is. For 30 years he's tried to con me, and he still hasn't figured out I'm 10 steps ahead." She wasn't kidding. Over the years, she'd indulged his endless string of doomed business ventures: a restaurant that folded in 6 months, a real estate flip that tanked in a market crash, even a shady essential oil MLM that earned a visit from the state attorney general. Grandma had warned me this would happen. In her final week, when she was weak and frail, she gripped my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Your uncle is a snake. He's been asking about my will for months. He brought a lawyer friend over, pretended it was a social call, but I overheard them discussing undue influence and mental capacity in the backyard. Promise me, Vivian, you'll fight for what's yours. Don't let him win." At the time, I thought she was just being paranoid. But as I sat in my kitchen a few weeks later, reading the legal documents Garrett had filed to contest the will, I realized she'd been right all along. He was challenging my ability to inherit. In his petition, Garrett claimed I was mentally unfit to handle the estate. He painted a picture of me as unstable and incapable of managing significant assets. His evidence included my decision to leave law school after what he called a nervous breakdown. He told the court I was a recluse with dozens of cats. I only had 2, and insisted I was spiraling into madness since Grandma's death. He even got our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, to sign a statement saying she'd seen me talking to invisible people in my backyard. In reality, I'd been chatting with my cats while gardening, but Garrett twisted it to sound sinister. The court date was 3 months out. That gave me plenty of time to prepare. But first, I had a realization. If Garrett wanted to paint me as unhinged, I might as well give him the performance of a lifetime. I spent 3 straight days researching the legal thresholds for mental incompetence, how they're defined, how they're proven, and, most importantly, how easily they can be manipulated by someone ruthless enough to play the system. And Garrett was nothing if not ruthless. Morrison leaned back in his chair and said it flatly. And of course, your regular doctor's testimony will need to support this too. The way they chuckled together after that, like a pair of old buddies swapping jokes over drinks, made my stomach turn. They didn't know I was recording everything. From an air vent above the kitchen, one of my best hidden cameras caught it all. Every smirk, every underhanded word. Meanwhile, Ruby kept digging into Garrett's trail of lies and financial disasters. And the deeper she went, the uglier it got. Your uncle's been living off credit for years, Ruby told me during one of our weekly updates. He's been paying one credit card with another. It's like this endless loop of debt that's going to implode any minute. She leaned back in her chair and sighed. He's been stringing people along, telling tenants he's coming into a big inheritance soon. That lies bought him loan extensions, advance rent payments, and even managed to stall his mortgage company for 6 months. The web of deceit was breathtaking in its audacity. Garrett had promised the same imaginary money to at least a dozen different people. But now that he'd learned he wasn't getting a cent, his entire financial house of cards was about to come crashing down. Ruby pulled out another folder and laid it on the table. And there's more. Turns out, this isn't Garrett's first rodeo. He pulled the same stunt 15 years ago with your grandfather. My eyes widened. Different circumstances, Ruby continued, but the playbook was identical. He claimed the heir wasn't mentally competent, got himself appointed as guardian, and tried to control the money. That attempt failed because other family members stepped in. But it shows this current scheme. It's not some desperate, last-minute grasp. It's calculated. He's been perfecting it for years. That revelation left me cold. Garrett wasn't just a greedy screw-up. He was a predator who hunted his own blood. 3 weeks before the hearing, I decided to make a move he'd never see coming. I reached out to his ex-wife, Rita. They'd been divorced for 15 years, but I'd heard enough about their split to know there was bad blood. Especially since Garrett had hidden assets during the divorce proceedings and left her with nothing. When I met Rita at a downtown cafe, she didn't even try to hide her disdain. He's trying to steal your inheritance, she said, laughing darkly as she stirred her coffee. God, that is so Garrett. That man has spent his entire life convincing himself he deserves things he hasn't earned. As she spoke, a fierce gleam lit up her eyes. During our marriage, he even tried to manipulate my elderly aunt into changing her will and leaving him her house. When that didn't work, he actually suggested we contest her will after her death. The man's shameless. When I shared my plan, Rita's grin turned predatory. I've been waiting years for someone to take him down, she said. Count me in. I've got boxes of evidence, financial records, notes, even recordings of him bragging about conning old relatives. She wasn't kidding. Rita had kept everything. She slid a thick folder across the table, filled with documentation from their marriage. Bank statements proving Garrett forged his grandfather's signature on a check. Medical records that disproved his claims about the old man's mental decline. Even a signed admission from their divorce where Garrett owned up to multiple scams. And then came the real jackpot. During the divorce, Rita said with a cold smile, I recorded most of our arguments. He never shut up about his tricks because he thought I'd never use it against him. But now, it's time. The recordings were damning. Hours of Garrett blabbing about stealing from elderly relatives. At one point, he even said outright, all it takes is the right kind of evidence to make a doctor question someone's mental capacity. 2 days before the hearing, I set my final trap. I called Cheryl, Garrett's current wife. My voice trembled as I spoke. I know you probably think I'm losing my mind, I said over the phone, but I found something in Grandma's files, something about Garrett. I'm scared to tell anyone else, but you deserve to know. Cheryl showed up at my house within the hour, her face pale and drawn. In the months since Grandma's death, I'd seen cracks forming in her marriage to Garrett. His mounting debt, his short temper, she was clearly feeling the strain. I handed her a stack of fake documents Ruby's tech-savvy nephew had crafted. Bank statements showing Garrett's hidden accounts. Emails hinting at his plans to abandon Cheryl for a fresh start. Even a phony retainer receipt for a divorce lawyer. The documents were fake, but Cheryl's tears were real. That bastard, she whispered, her voice breaking. I knew something was off. He's been secretive for months, late nights, private phone calls, credit card bills from restaurants I've never heard of. Hotel receipts for business trips that didn't exist. God, I knew it. As she sat there, sobbing into her hands, I kept the hidden recorder running. By the time Cheryl left, she was more than willing to testify about Garrett's financial ruin and shady behavior. "Garrett's lost his damn mind," she said through clenched teeth. "If he thinks family means screwing me over, he's already dead to me." I smiled faintly as the door clicked shut behind her. The trap was set, and Garrett had no idea he was walking straight into it. This was the perfect proof I needed, I thought, as Cheryl leaned in close and whispered, her voice shaking. "Last week, Garrett brought home some medical forms and asked me to sign them as a witness. He claimed they were just standard paperwork, but when I looked closer, they were requests for access to your medical records. He even forged your signature on the originals." That was it, the nail in the coffin. Garrett hadn't just lied and schemed. He had committed a serious crime. He'd violated medical privacy to strengthen his case against me. The morning of the court date, I walked into that courtroom looking like an entirely different person. Gone was the disheveled girl in stained sweaters. In her place stood a polished, confident woman in a tailored business suit I'd kept hidden for months. My hair was freshly styled, my makeup flawless. I looked every bit the capable law school graduate that I was, because I was. When Garrett saw me, his face drained of color. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered in a panic, loud enough that I caught it. What happened to her? Yesterday, she wasn't even coherent. His attorney, Patterson, an expert in shady guardianship cases, looked equally rattled but tried to recover. "Sometimes people with mental illnesses have brief moments of clarity," he muttered back. "This doesn't change the underlying patterns." But I could see the cracks forming in their confidence. The hearing began, and Patterson led Garrett's case with a dramatic flair. One by one, they trotted out witnesses. Mrs. Henderson from next door repeated her embellished story about seeing me talking to invisible people. Dr. Morrison testified next, painting a grim picture of paranoid delusions and cognitive decline. "She exhibits the classic signs of paranoid schizophrenia," Morrison said gravely. "In my professional opinion, Miss Walsh is incapable of distinguishing reality from fantasy. Left unsupervised, she could pose a danger to herself. Her obsession with cats is particularly troubling. She's convinced they're working with government agencies to monitor her." He even presented my staged, crazy wall photos as evidence, pointing to them with false authority. "In my opinion, Miss Walsh is utterly unfit to manage her affairs, let alone oversee a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Immediate action is necessary." For a moment, the judge's expression darkened. I could tell he was disgusted, but not with me. When it was my turn, I stood up calmly and addressed the court. I presented my evidence like a seasoned attorney: video recordings of Garrett and Morrison's conspiracy, financial documents Ruby had uncovered, testimony from Cheryl, and Rita's folder of damning proof. As the pieces fell into place, the judge's frown deepened. "I've seen some despicable cases in my courtroom," he said at last, "but this level of fraud and cruelty is appalling. You tried to have your own niece committed to gain control of her inheritance. That isn't just illegal, it's inhuman." The bailiff stepped forward and cuffed Garrett's wrists. As they dragged him past me, his eyes burned with hatred. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "This isn't over. The family never forgets. You'll get what's coming to you." But he was wrong. This was over. 3 months later, Garrett was convicted of fraud, perjury, and breaching medical privacy laws. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Dr. Morrison lost his license and faced charges for false testimony and malpractice. Investigators reopened several of his other cases, and his gambling debts became public knowledge. Cheryl filed for divorce immediately. She walked away with half of Garrett's remaining assets, not that there was much left after legal fees and restitution. She even testified against him in court, sealing his fate. On my 25th birthday, I inherited my grandmother's estate, just as she intended. The first thing I did was establish a foundation dedicated to protecting elderly people from financial exploitation by their own families. Ruby became the chief investigator, and together we've helped dozens of families avoid what I went through. I also changed every lock on my grandmother's properties and installed state-of-the-art security systems. The hidden cameras I once used to expose Garrett were replaced with professional-grade equipment, because I learned an important lesson: predators rarely work alone. I re-enrolled in law school with part of my inheritance, determined to use my hard-earned knowledge to help others. In those months of pretending to be unstable, I learned something profound. The line between acting crazy and becoming crazy is thinner than anyone realizes. Alone in that big house, surrounded by staged chaos, there were nights I nearly forgot I was pretending. The hypervigilance, the obsessive routines, even fabricated madness weighs on your mind after a while. That's why I sought therapy. Dr. Williams helped me process the trauma, not just from the legal battle, but from growing up in a family where manipulation and gaslighting were weapons of choice. Your uncle didn't just want your money, Dr. Williams told me during one session. He wanted to break you psychologically, to isolate you, to make you question your own reality so others would doubt you too. That's classic psychological abuse. But I fought back and won. Now, 3 years later, I'm a practicing attorney specializing in elder law and family protection. The foundation Ruby and I built has saved 43 families so far, with more every year. Each time we stop a predator, whether it's a greedy stepchild, a corrupt lawyer, or a shady caregiver, I can almost hear Grandma's voice in my head. That's my girl, finally using her brains for something that matters. Just last week, we secured our biggest victory yet. We exposed a man who'd been siphoning money from his 90-year-old mother's account for years. He'd planned to declare her incompetent, sell her home, and dump her in a nursing home where he'd have free reign over her finances. Sound familiar? It was Garrett's playbook all over again. But this time, Ruby's team was ready. They built an airtight case the court couldn't ignore. We saved the woman's house, her freedom, and $800,000 her son had tried to steal. After the hearing, she hugged me tight, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. In that moment, I knew Grandma would be proud. Her money hadn't just secured my future, it was protecting countless others from predators like Garrett. The house is quiet now. My 2 cats lounge in the sunlit garden, where Grandma once taught me how to tell flowers from weeds. In the evenings, I sit on the porch swing she loved, staring out at the lake Garrett will never see again, not after prison. Last month, I received another letter from him, his 4th since his conviction. In it, he begged for forgiveness, said he'd found God, claimed he wanted to make amends and be part of the family again. I read the first line, then dropped it straight into the trash. Some people don't deserve a second chance, especially when they didn't deserve the first. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living the life they tried to steal from you, and using it to make sure they can never hurt anyone else again.